You can notice is South America is huge in comparison to North America and the United States, yet the United States has played a prominent role in the economics and the politics of the whole region, but in particular in Central America and the Caribbean. But to fully understand really the need for a good neighbor policy and why it's considered by some to be a fairly dramatic change in policy, and by others not much of a change, we have to understand the attitude towards Latin America. And this is probably a very good start here, is this image of the white man's burden, and, published in 1899. And you can see here on the rocks, there's oppression and barbarism, ignorance, vice, superstition, brutality. And they're being carried up to civilization on the backs of the British and the United States, right? And the British, there's China in there, Middle East, India, and on the backs of the United States, there's Cuba, 1899. Now, you have to understand, this is the attitude in the United States and among policymakers, among much of the public, that the United States is going to bring civilization and culture to the region, and whether they want it or not. And it's obviously, and what's the white man's burden a reference to? It's poem. Kipling, yeah. It's a Kipling's poem. And there, if you want an interesting exercise in the classroom, is to take Rudyard Kipling's poem and compare it to The Black Man's Burden, which is a response to Kipling. Let's see, just a few years later. It's not very long after. I don't think it's the same year. But it's The Black Man's Burden, and it's focusing on black man's perspective and what that means, what the burden really is on people of color. It's not just black being referred to there, but it's called The Black Man's Burden. And this is the view. This is what is going to drive policy towards Latin America, and especially Central America, that they are incapable of governing, that they are incapable of running their own economy and deciding on policy, and they're capable of effectively using the natural resources that exist in the countries. And it's going to take the United States to guide them through there. And here are a couple other images a little bit later. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt. And this is, we're not going to talk about this kind of gunboat diplomacy, but I'm going to mention it very, very briefly. This is Teddy Roosevelt carrying his big stick, but he's got the U.S. Navy behind him. And that was used, it's a good image because the U.S. Navy is used extensively throughout Central America and really any of the countries in the Caribbean, because of the mobility. The U.S. can land troops, control ports, very quickly, relatively, and very easily, because none of these countries have a substantial navy. And even the army is somewhat limited. So any threat when U.S. ships pull into port, pay attention, especially if there's some kind of economic or political crisis going on in the country. And it would become a very useful tool for Washington. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt building the Panama Canal here, which is an essential part of this discussion. The United States becomes interested in Central America because of Panama. And what's the significance of the Panama Canal to the United States? Why is it important? Yeah, blue oceanating and trade. And the United States basically forces this on Panama. And there's an attempt to buy it from Colombia. It's controlled by Colombia. The Colombian Senate basically laughs at the United States. You've got to be crazy. This is paraphrasing, by the way. This is an actual translation. You know, say, first of all, the offer is ridiculous. Secondly, we're not going to sell this huge chunk of land. And it's not the only place that the United States is looking to build a canal. What's the other candidate in Central America? Yeah. And Nicaragua is one of the top candidates, not just for the United States, but the French are interested at different times, the British and Panama. And so Teddy Roosevelt does not respond very positively to the Colombian government's response, actually makes a racial comment slur, and then proceeds to support Panamanian revolutionaries, and once they declare an independent Panamanian government, he recognizes it immediately. And that's another element. There's the Navy, the gunboat diplomacy, but also the issue of recognition. And we'll come back to that. If the United States recognizes you as a legitimate government in this area, then it's hard to unseat that government.
Brian, was you talking about legitimate Panamanian independence group before that, or?
There was an organization. They were organized. They had talked about it, but whether they could have done anything without U.S. support, unlikely. I haven't seen any research that suggests that. And then there's this view, which is 1914, which again emphasizes this. This is Philippines, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Panama before the United States, and then Philippines, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Panama after the United States. Again, bringing civilization and culture, and we're making them wealthy, taking them out of poverty, and so on. And this is also the time that economic links are growing significantly with the region. And you have to consider that. So we have the Navy, we have the issue of recognition, which gives political legitimacy to a government, and then we have the economic growth, and significant economic growth. And it's based on, for Central America, it's really an export-based economy. They're exporting goods to the United States. And